Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It's the last day of July, July 31st, Thursday, July 31st, not the other kind of July 31st. Thursday, July 31st, 2025. Time to do this all over again. Things, I don't know what to tell you. They continue apace. The president still crazy and apparently out of it, and still under the influence of Laura Loomer somehow, as it turns out. The Epstein story continues. I don't know if you guys know about the Epstein story. Jeffrey Epstein. And another thing, Jeffrey Epstein. So, more developments on that front. I don't know what else to add at this point. There's a whole list of things that we got to get to. Some immediate happenings in the news. Others, background information that you need to get. All sorts of comings and goings in the administration. 6 months in, we're still hiring and firing like crazy. And like I said, sometimes at the whims of lunatics like Laura Loomer, which I just don't understand. But have yet got information to report on that one. And of course, we'll once again, I guess, be interested in turning hour one into the Tom Lehrer show, which is something we can do because it's still royalty free. It's still no copyright claims on that. So far, I haven't heard about the second copyright claim that was lodged the first time we played the Tom Lehrer music just the other day. No word, I don't think, so far from YouTube about yesterday's electric company installments, which I have to send to Greg. I should have waited until you were back on the air, Greg, in order to share them with you. But why don't we start out that way? We can. Where's that? Oh, you know what? Here we go. All the breaking news. We'll bring Greg in with at least a little sound effect, if not a full fanfare. I always like this one. Sort of
Batman, the newspapers,
along with the newspaper. As Batman as Paperboy, I guess.
Yeah,
so,
great.
Hey,
I love that one.
It's always a favorite.
So I sent you a picture,
a
cartoon, which is very cute. It's a gravestone in a lovely park of Tom Lehrer, and the dates of his birth and death are 1928 through 2025. He was 97 years old.
Yes. And
the gravestone has a pigeon perched on top, another pigeon at the base of it, sort of pecking away at whatever's there, and a third pigeon who had already eaten whatever's at the base of this gravestone, keeled over, X's for the eyes and the little feet sticking up. And that's in homage to Tom Lehrer's Poisoning Pigeons in the Park, one of his great pieces that everybody should be familiar with, and if you're not, you're about to be. Because let's play it.
All right, let's see. About an estimate volume level for a beginner here. Let's roll. Ooh, catchy.
By the way, his piano playing is quite good.
Yeah.
Spring is here, spring is here. Life is Skittles and life is beer. I think the loveliest time of the year is the spring. I do. Don't you? Of course you do. But there's one thing that makes spring complete for me, and makes every Sunday a treat for me. All the world seems in tune on a spring afternoon when we're poisoning pigeons in the park. Every Sunday you'll see my sweetheart and me as we poison the pigeons in the park. When they see us coming, the birdies all try and hide, but they still go for peanuts when coated with a cyanide. The sun's shining bright, everything seems all right when we're poisoning pigeons in the park.
You see why it's a hit.
We've gained notoriety and caused much anxiety in the Audubon Society with our games. They call it impiety and lack of propriety and quite a variety of unpleasant names. But it's not against any religion to want to dispose of a pigeon. So why don't you come with me and we'll poison the pigeons in the park? And maybe we'll do in a squirrel or two while we're poisoning pigeons in the park. We'll murder them all amid laughter and merriment, except for the few we take home to experiment. My pulse will be quickening with each drop of strychnine we feed to a pigeon. It just takes a smidgen to poison a pigeon in the park.
So today is my last day on the show for this week, and I just want to again say goodbye and rest in power to Tom Lehrer, a genius whose lack of presence in our current day and age is really too bad. I don't know if I mentioned, but he did have a quote at one point saying, I quit the music satire game and didn't do political satire. Political satire died, he said, when Henry Kissinger won the Nobel Peace Prize.
Yeah, and an early date for it there, too. It hasn't recovered at all, by the way, in terms of it. I don't even know what he would have done had he been, let's say, in his youth and still writing during this era. I imagine he'd end up arrested by the end of it. Yeah. But yeah, it's a real talent and a real loss, and everybody's enjoyed it. I've got probably more comments through email and on social media about these segments than almost anything else that we've done. So for Athena 5000, who asked what was for today, the answer is poisoning pigeons in the park.
Because it's so lighthearted, and it puts you in a good mood, and
a little murder tune. Well, that was the genius of it.
So let's get back to our world.
Oh, no. All right.
A couple of pieces here from Greg Sargent highlighting a couple of issues that I think are worth going over in the New Republic. He does podcasts, but he kindly posts transcripts of the podcast, which are really very helpful. So I had personally asked him to do that, which he did, and I thanked him for it. I'm not saying he did it for me. He probably had it in mind, but a lot of people, said, I missed the podcast, or I don't have time for the podcast, or I'm a reader, not a listener. That's how I learn.
Doing my own podcast, right? These
you could read, you could write, or you could listen. Those are the three adult ways of learning. And for those who only teach to listening, the readers get upset. And if you say, well, don't take notes, just listen to me, the writers get upset. So you got to teach all three modalities when you're doing adult learning. And by the way, you have to repeat yourself. So I don't know if you've heard this, but Jeffrey Epstein is like a big deal.
Yes. And still, too, today there's even actual news. Except
there is. So listen, I want to do this piece from the New Republic under the co-heading Drain the Swamp.
All right.
Trump's Epstein fiasco worsens as Democrats suddenly find big new weapon. And I don't know if enjoy is the correct word, but you'll appreciate this because it's a procedure thing.
Okay. Yes.
Trump's Epstein fiasco worsens as Dems suddenly find big new weapon. Senate Democrats are using a 1928 law to pressure Trump to release the Epstein files. The White House will ignore him, and then here's what could happen next. And so this is clever, it's legal, it's perfectly okay, and it actually has an end game to it besides just performative garbage, which is what calling for his impeachment is these days with a Democratic minority in the House.
Yeah. Not that you shouldn't just say, hey,
it's not a waste of time. You should, but understand it's not going anywhere because, you don't have the majority and you don't have the votes.
No reason not to say that a guy should be bounced.
But in this case, the New York Times reports that 7 Democrats, this is Greg Sargent writing, on the upper chamber's Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs Committee, just sent a letter to the Department of Justice demanding a turnover of the information it has compiled related to the investigation pursuant to the 2019 arrest of Epstein on sex trafficking charges using a decades-old statute. Remember, 7 Democrats.
Okay.
The minority group.
Yeah.
Because Republicans are in the majority, so they have more. Under a section of federal law commonly referred to in the Senate as the Rule of Five, because when you're in the Congress, you always have these dumb things that only insiders understand when you refer to them.
Yeah,
So this is the rule of 5. Government agencies are required to provide relevant information if any 5 members of the committee, which is the Chamber's Chief Oversight Panel, Government Affairs, request it.
Yeah. I mean,
okay. The reason that exists, the law in question, any 5 members of the Senate committee, meaning it could be the minority, request any information that's related to any matter within the jurisdiction of the committee, and the executive agency shall submit it, meaning you have to. And there's also something similar for the House, but right now we're talking about the Senate.
That larger number.
This 1928 law was passed because of the Teapot Dome scandal.
Okay. Yeah.
Right? That scandal, which involved a corrupt cabinet member under Warren Harding taking bribes in exchange for oil leases, resulted in higher public awareness of governmental corruption.
Yeah.
And the statute that Senate Democrats are now invoking was originally designed to ensure that the minority in Congress has real access to what executive agencies are doing. And so it's legitimate. If you're an originalist, you're doing exactly what the law was intended.
Yeah.
Why is that important? Because what happens, as Greg Sargent spells out, is, okay, well, then they demand it. They send a sternly worded letter. The House, may or may not do something similar, but the White House ignores it.
Yeah. Fine.
That's where we normally end Democratic, upsetness, resistance to what's going on. But in this case, because it is a law, because it is a statute,
yes,
and because they have standing, the Senate can sue.
Okay.
And the Supreme Court has already determined that in certain cases, House and Senate, in fact, do have standing to sue the White House. So there's a legitimate chance that it could succeed, not because of the law, not because of the White House response, but because it actually could go to the courts and the courts could enforce this.
Well, all things being equal and people operating under the same rules sounds great. It's nice. It's always fun to uncover a new procedural tool. We'll see how well this one goes. I guess in order to get the Senate to act as a body and to sue and to utilize its standing, you would probably need to control a majority of that body.
Right. But this law was written so that the minority has some say in it.
Yes,
Sarah Binder says the whole matter will turn on what the courts say. The statute is very clear. Well, she says agencies shall provide these documents, but the question is whether the courts would agree that a group of senators is the same thing as the whole chamber. And do they have standing? And that's what's going to be in court.
Yeah. And, all right. Everybody, I'm sure, has a guess about how they think the Supreme Court will deal with that one. But you got to have these fights at a minimum to illustrate what's going on and how out of control things have actually gotten. But
here's some historical precedent, though.
All right.
2017.
Yeah.
Trump International Hotel in Washington, D.C., a corrupt, stay here for money for international people kind of setup.
Yeah, an emoluments machine.
So House Democrats invoked the statute in 2017 to force the first Trump administration to divulge information related to it. An appeals court ruled House Democrats did have standing to bring the lawsuit.
Okay.
And the Supreme Court agreed to hear the case, but it didn't happen because the White House turned over the documents.
Yeah. Well, yes. And sometimes they do that to avoid setting the precedent if they think.
Right. That won't happen this time, so that precedent might in fact get set.
Yeah, maybe. We'll see. It was a slightly different, sort of scenario. It was still a Republican majority in the House at the time, but it was a Paul Ryan majority. So sort of before they completely abandoned all pretense, I guess. But they were well on their way to abandoning most pretense. They didn't have to.
Right. Norm Ornstein says, even if it fails, it's at least putting the Roberts Court in the light that people need to see it, which really puts pressure on them. And our friend Marcy Wheeler writes, look, this can help break through the clutter so the public hears about it.
That's true. We're hearing about it right now, as a matter of fact. So it's working on that front. Yeah. I'm not going to give anybody any false hope about this thing. They're going to do everything
Right,
they
it's
can
a
to
long
defy
shot.
the law, but they should be out in front defying the law, and people should be able to point to that and say,
Well,
this is bad. We should not be defying the law. This is not how things are supposed to work. All of us could lose everything this way.
The way I would put it is
let's-
the law is absolutely positively on their side. They're doing the right thing. But with the courts these days, who knows?
Right. Well, it's just one of those things. I mean, there's another similar provision of law under which the IRS shall provide Trump's tax returns to the the chairs of the relevant tax committees, and I think they dragged their feet on that one for about 3.5 years, and fought over the standing on that one as well. And it's the same construction, shall provide, and they just said, well, what if we shan't? Or didn't anyway.
Yeah.
And here we are. And how many of us have read Trump's tax returns?
Right.
None.
Some of it is out there, but that's through legal suits prior to his being president.
Look, right. They're out there because of legal cases. Bring your legal cases. Bits and pieces that get out is better than nothing.
Right. We don't get satisfaction from the courts the way we deserve and should, and shall. But that branch is doing better than the other two.
All right. Yes. Although, well, they've found a way to put them under the thumb now too. I'll have to discuss that one later. But the complaint filed against Judge Boasberg just the other day, which we discussed, I think on the date of filing, we should probably revisit that. That's developing into essentially a DOJ policy declaring that it is now illegal to rule against the president of the United States in court, or at least Donald Trump. It may not be applicable to any other president, but now that they're able to, they've established a policy that says anything that rules against him is essentially an effort to undermine the integrity either of the executive who's being thwarted or the federal judiciary itself, which is debasing itself in ruling against the all-powerful unitary executive, and possibly both. And, of course, Pam Bondi has declared that the Department of Justice will not stand for this sort of rogue judiciary action. Ruling against
down.
president is, Oh, all right, that's true. We should offer them a chair. After all, you can't be charged. The presidents can't be charged while they're sitting presidents.
I mean, after all, where you stand depends upon where you sit. That's always been true.
That's true. We've explained why. I'll get back to the Boasberg thing later on, but yes, well, that's interesting. I love the procedural tools. It's always pays to be aware of them. And, well, it used to be that at least if the Supreme Court was going to save the president's bacon with stupid reasoning, they had to tell you what the reasoning was. And now I guess if they can get it to
get it on the shadow docket so you don't have to talk about it,
and then lift an injunction against the president somehow. I don't know how you would structure that one, but then they don't have to give you a reason, and then eventually they'll remember, oh yeah, actually we don't have to give a reason for substantive cases either. It's just tradition, and to hell with that.
It's unfortunate, but as a layperson who's neither an expert or all that familiar with congressional procedure, let alone the law, I'm completely fluent in the shadow docket and how they use it. It's terrible.
Yes.
I shouldn't know this.
No, it's supposed to remain in the shadows. It's supposed to be rarely used and not of as much consequence as the substantive merits docket cases where they actually sit down and figure out what do they think and why.
And also, shadow docket and other things for quick action makes sense. Like if we're going to kill this, the state is going to kill this guy tonight, and we really don't have 3 weeks to discuss it.
Right.
That I understand. But none of this is an emergency any more than Trump's tariff stuff is an emergency. And by the way, you should sue him over that.
Yeah. And people have, and they have done, and we'll see how that goes. They don't seem to think that stopping that stuff is an emergency. But also the Trump this second Trump administration has been before the Supreme Court with more emergency cases than I think pretty much all the previous administrations combined at this point.
But
Certainly
that's
all
the thing. The
20th
lower
century
courts are
and
doing their
forward.
job and generally ruling against Trump because he's usually wrong, and then the Supreme Court overturns it with some
Yeah.
cockamamie new procedure that they decide that, has nothing to do with anything, but the real thing is that Republicans have to win.
Basically it. And if they can't, if they don't feel comfortable telling you that that's all there is, then they just say, well,
Right.
it's
It very much reminds me of
opinion
the
on
old
it. Sorry.
Wisconsin Supreme Court, which was Republican-based, and we had to get rid of that,
Yeah.
which we did with elections.
Yeah. Well, there was
Now
a
things are
mechanism.
much
This
better
one
in
we have a different
Wisconsin
one.
because of it.
Yeah. We've got to figure out what the mechanism is for making the change here.
Well, you shouldn't elect judges because, and I'm thinking, well, based on Wisconsin, better their
Yeah,
system
I
than
mean,
the Supreme Court system.
I never was a big fan, but I guess I might have.
You don't like it? Vote them out.
Oh well.
Otherwise, the Supreme Court system is you don't like it, wait for them to die.
That's it. That's all we've got, and that's
Yeah.
why they appoint 25-year-old justices.
So this other New Republic piece, completely different topic, but equally interesting. This is Greg Sargent interviewing Paul Krugman on Trump's Europe deal, a scam on his voters. As the emerging details of Trump's trade agreement with Europe puncture his hype, economist Paul Krugman explains at length why it's actually a big loss for our country and especially for the MAGA base. And again, you have to remember, you can't go by headlines in the national press. They are all of them completely in the Chris Cillizza, Chuck Todd school of, well, this is terrible and awful and probably not even legal, but it just might work. And so all they do is discuss whether or not the con worked or it didn't work. Not that it's a con, not the underlying original reporting as to how the con happened or, what's wrong with it. Just did it work? It's the only thing they talk about. Especially true for the Washington Post for years. So it's unfortunate, but Krugman, who no longer works in the New York Times for various reasons, says this is a scam. The whole thing is a scam. It's being widely portrayed, says Greg Sargent, as a win for Trump and a humiliation for the EU. That's not true. None of it's true. But we think the claim that Trump won is just bizarre. The details of the deal themselves cast doubt on the idea. It's not at all clear what we gain as a country.
Yes.
And the phrase Trump won has to mean a lot more than Trump gets to claim a victory and the media plays along.
You would hope for more, yeah.
So Sargent says the basics of the deal that the U.S. is imposing a 15% tariff, used to be 1%, on most imports from Europe, with some exceptions. There's talk about the EU agreeing to buy $750 billion in American energy spread out over years. And to start with, can you walk us through the tariff piece? And Krugman says, well, it means anybody bringing European goods into the U.S. is going to pay a tax equal to 15% of the value. And that doesn't tell you who pays it, but basically it's going to be the U.S. consumer, and none of it's being paid by the Europeans. So has Europe reduced the price of stuff it sells in the United States? No, it hasn't gone down at all. So the Europeans aren't paying it. At the moment, a lot of it's being borne by U.S. businesses, which haven't yet passed it on to the consumers, but they will. And that's one of the things about, well, you said the tariffs are going to hurt us, and I really don't see it. Well, it's too soon. There's a whole lot of data from the feds about how the imports surged because tariffs were coming. Then they plummeted when tariffs came. People, meaning businesses, because businesses are people, my friend, stockpiled everything, and they are trying not to pass it on to the consumer on the hopes that this will pass because Taco Trump, but it's unclear what's going to happen. And once it's clear to them that it's not going away, then they're going to start passing that on to the consumer, and these things take time. So no matter how you slice it, the tariffs are going to be a loser for low-income consumers, right, says Sargent. And Krugman says, yeah, people with lower incomes spend a higher share of their income than people with high incomes. And so there's some indication that the goods that are being hit hard are things that lower income people spend more on. Clothing, for example. And we're getting big tax cuts, and the tax cuts are for high income people, and we're getting benefit cuts for low income people. So you put the whole thing together, It's an upward redistribution of income from people who can't afford it to people who can. That's a summary. And the trade policy is part of that. And it isn't really about trade at all. So what we import from Europe is mostly manufactured goods and some agricultural. And it's true that wine will pay more. And that's an upper income thing. But olive oil, which is used in a lot of things, pasta, going to cost more, cars. We import a lot of intermediate goods like capital equipment, and the machinery that's used in U.S. production often comes from Europe, German engineering. And so that will cost more, and it'll end up being a higher price. And the quirk here, which is important, cars from Europe pay 15% tariff, cars from Canada pay 25%. The thing about a car from Canada is that the content of the car and the parts are made in the U.S., so basically products involving a lot of U.S. jobs are paying a higher tariff rate than European jobs. So we're actually tilting the playing field against U.S. manufacturing.
Yes. I noticed that in the Japan agreement, too. Again, the claim was we'll put a tariff on the cars if they're made in Japan, but if you build your Nissans here in the United States, you won't face a tariff. But you will be paying 50% tariff to import the steel that you need to build
and the
cars.
aluminum, yes. And so that's also true for Japan. And interestingly, Trump also said, we have a win with Japan. Japan says, well, the terms we agree to aren't the terms you announced.
Right. And Europe, largely the same
But
thing.
that's typically Trump.
Yeah.
Right? I'm going to negotiate. I would like you to tile my bathroom, and I'm going to pay you $100. And you go, okay. And then Trump announces, this impressive tile guy agreed to, tile my bathroom for $50.
Yeah.
Wait. The agreement was 100. No, it was 50. You're reneging on it.
Yeah.
I'm going to put pressure on you because you're a loser. You're
a reneger. Can't believe it. You renege too much. It's crazy what he does, and it even extends beyond that. Not only is he going to do the bathroom for $50, he's going to do every bathroom in every Trump hotel.
Well, reality has a liberal bias, but my point is how it's covered in the media.
Yes, and that is problematic. It gets plastered there as win, and the other side says, none of this was in the agreement. It's crazy. Hi, everybody. It's me, David Waldman. Yes, the same guy who interrupts you all the time. Interrupting you one more time just to tell you again, another reminder that your contributions are what keep this show on the air, and Patreon.com, Patreon.com, is still among the easiest ways to make the sustaining subscription donations that keep us afloat. Are you ready for the pep talk about how our Patreon campaign is still going strong and growing? Well, too bad. Yeah, the plain fact is we actually are headed in the wrong direction, and whereas we once had about 175 monthly patrons, we're now actually down below 150. Time to recruit some more. Not exactly the kind of news I wanted to share, but there it is. For those of you in a position to support the show, Patreon.com does make it easy to make those secure, recurring monthly contributions to do so. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. We've been through a lot together. The worst of the pandemic, we hope. The worst of the insurrection, we hope. So go ahead and treat yourself. You don't need an excuse. Give yourself the gift of a little something you enjoy in life. Support the show. And of course, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running on those options too. So thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We couldn't, or at least shouldn't, do it without you. Hope you'll be on board soon too. Thanks for all your support. Alrighty, welcome back everybody to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Let's go. As I asked the other day, by the way, if Justice could let us know how many people were listening to the live stream these days. And I had in my head the figure of about 100 or so people listening, and I guess that was from years ago, because apparently pretty regularly over 200, and that every once in a while things spike and there are in excess of 400 people listening to the live stream alone, and then of course later on in the day another 500 to 1,000 downloading the thing. The audience is growing. It's great news.
Based on Tom Lehrer fans, and
yes,
that's much appreciated.
But I will point out every once in a while when the traffic spikes, that actually it actually sometimes will cost Netroots Radio additional server charges when that happens. So when you're feeling generous and thinking about who you need to be supporting out there in the wider world, Netroots Radio, should always be on your list as well. So we should have a little pitch for them. And,
right. Speaking of
throw their
technical
link
aspects, a couple of things.
Yes.
One of our listeners pointed out that the sound quality wasn't so great yesterday, so I'm trying to move the microphone closer to my face based on 2 lifetimes ago when David and I did media training with the late Joel Silberman, an excellent Broadway producer and messaging guru.
Surely a
He taught us that if you put your face close to the microphone, your voice drops. And it's good if that's what you wish. And the problem, of course, is that if it's directly in your face, you can't see the screen. So positioning the screen, the microphone, your mouth, and all these things, that's probably why, as somebody put it, it sounded like I was in a fishbowl yesterday. I hope I fixed it, but
it does sound
our listeners will let us know. And the other thing is, I wonder if there is a German word for I'm afraid to talk to David at 9:29 because it might be 9:30, and so you don't want it to go over into the we're live now.
Right. Yeah.
Got to be a German word for that because there's a German word for everything.
Pretty much. Yeah. I don't know the word, but it's probably out there. Yeah. And we've talked through breaks occasionally. It just depends,
Oh, I'm over it. Don't get me wrong. We are not professionals, but I try.
Sometimes we really just can't
people
wait
at home
to get
know
back
I'm
on the air
trying.
To share something, and we start talking about something. And then on the other hand, the bunion is really bothering me. Really? Well, you should try it.
No, that's Paul Bunyan, and it's Paul Bunyan Day all over the world. And David and I can do this, and the next thing you know, it's Friday. So by the way, we were supposed to do the show. Oh yeah, I forgot.
All right, I know there's a long list of things we have to get to. That's true.
Speaking of which,
yes,
one of the things about trade is that one of the Trump tricks is to make some outrageous claim, like for example, Europe is not playing fair with our hot weather. So I'm going to demand that we sell our hot weather to Europe, and they're going to have to pay for it because they've been taking all this hot weather for free, and we're getting screwed because of it. And then announce that we have an agreement with Europe on paper that they will purchase all our hot weather. It's already working. By tomorrow, it's going to be cooler out, and so I get it's a win for me. And I don't understand why you want to talk about Jeffrey Epstein when I'm doing all these wonderful things.
Oh yeah, right, that pervert. I forgot about that guy. Good thing you brought him up. Sorry there, Mr. President, but
so we will talk about it. This is Aaron Blake looking at a YouGov poll. Americans say by 14 points, 46 to 32, they believe Trump was involved in Epstein's crimes.
Oh.
Now, only 32 don't. That makes sense. That's MAGA.
Yeah.
The rest of the country thinks he was or isn't sure, but they'll be sure when, they release stuff.
Okay. Let's release it.
Now, this is from the Bulwark. Trump fumes and fumbles. On the Epstein scandal, his Stonewall is turning to rubble.
Well.
And it won't hold. And that's because the metaphysical matters aside, people tend not to make good decisions when fuming and frustrated and exasperated. They make mistakes, and Trump and his minions are making mistakes.
True.
It's pretty clear that once the Trump administration decided on a strategy of stonewalling and cover-up, particularly motivated by a determination not to let the world see whatever the Epstein files contain about Trump, they should have stuck to it. They would have had a rough few weeks, but by repeating over and over, it's the determination of the Department of Justice and the FBI that no further disclosure would be appropriate or warranted. They might have written it out. But if you're going to stonewall, especially if you don't face the threat of special counsel. And so the administration scrambled to distract its own supporters by garbage. Assassination of Martin Luther King, investigating Obama. And then that just raised the question in their mind, okay, so why not release the Epstein files? And again, underestimating how MAGA is built around conspiracy theory and the deep state. And the Epstein files, of course, is at the heart of it, but it's more about the deep state and covering up for the rich and wealthy. That's why talking to Ghislaine Maxwell doesn't do it, because covering for her is part of covering for the rich and wealthy. So dangling a pardon for her doesn't help convince the conspiracy theorists that you're not covering stuff up, because it's a pretty obvious attempt to cover stuff up. That's the kind of mistake they're making.
Yes. Well, as you were saying, you don't make good decisions when you're scrambling and panicking. Also, just if the baseline is you're dumb, that's probably not going to help anything.
Right. Todd Blanche, one of Trump's defense lawyers who now works like second in command in the Department of Justice, probably runs the place because Pam Bondi's an idiot. The Department of Justice will share additional information about what we learned at the appropriate time, he said after interviewing her. Only setting up MAGA for, okay, if you have stuff, release it.
Yeah.
That's, again, kind of mistake they're making. They're trying to make it go away. This stuff isn't making it go away. It's just deepening the idea they're covering something up.
Yeah. I now occurs to me when I mentioned at the outset of the show that Laura Loomer was back in the news because she's apparently also, once again, able to convince Trump somehow to hire and fire various people based on her whims, which she disguises as protecting, the loyalty factor inside the Trump administration. But Laura Loomer, like a week ago, was, and I imagine she's probably would say she's still committed to it, was breaking with Trump over the Epstein thing, and was one of the people, I think, who was insisting that there has to be more disclosure. Although now it makes a little bit more sense. My first question was, why is he listening to Laura Loomer? She's attacking him out there. Usually he, retaliates and says, "You're out. I'll freeze you out." But I imagine this is supposed to be maybe a sop to her and maybe to other people. You're not doing what I want on the Epstein files, but you can buy me back if you fire the following people that I don't like or have fought with online. Maybe that's what's behind it, and we'll see how long that lasts, because they are also very greedy people, and Laura Loomer will probably take this as newfound increase in her influence, and in 3 days she'll be using it to try to push for more Epstein disclosures and run into the brick wall again. It's weird.
So this is from the Washington Post. We texted nearly 1,100 Americans about Trump and the Epstein files, biggest focus group ever. And here's what they said. And they point out the Post poll found that most Americans are paying at least some attention, so this does break through. Americans largely disapprove of how Trump is handling the issue. Most Democrats and independents disapprove. Those are the ones who decide election, independents. And Republicans expressing a mix of approval and uncertainty, so it splits the Republican base. Only about 68% or so think Trump is doing okay on the Epstein stuff. And that means 11%, something like that, disagree, and the rest are uncertain. But if you only get 68% of your base in any given election, you lose.
Yeah, well, splitting the base, it's even if it's 70-30, if it's the hardcore base and you keep squeaking by, and that's how you're winning your elections, unwise, to say the least.
Most Americans strongly support releasing all files in the Epstein case and suspect the documents contain embarrassing information about Trump, Democrats, and billionaires. So it's out there. That's the thing. People understand that Trump is in those files. Whether it's true or to the extent of how much doesn't matter. They, quote, know, end quote, scare quotes, that he's in those files.
Maybe it's just because I went to lunch with the guy.
Yeah,
you don't know.
Over and over, as he poached bikini-clad teenagers from Mar-a-Lago.
Right, with no pants on. It was brunch. What? No, I don't want to hear about it. But look, he loved inviting Epstein over to Mar-a-Lago for parties and importing, cheerleaders, calendar girls, as he once was calling them, but, and bringing in and running around commenting on them with Epstein. I don't know why Epstein got such a thrill out of it. He had, I don't know if he understood how to be attracted to mature adults. So, I don't know. He liked laughing with Trump, I guess. That was it.
So the Washington Post texted 1,100 people. I'm not going to read you 1,100 texts, but they did in their graphic put up 6 representative comments.
Allegedly representative.
Well, I think they are in terms of how it breaks down based on their polling.
Very suspicious of the Post now. Yes.
Well, in fact, the first one was suspicious.
Aha. See?
So, yes, you were right, David. The second one was a whole mess.
All right.
The third was he was involved.
Uh-huh.
Now, there's always the MAGA person. He's trying to be transparent. Feels like a cover-up. And the sixth one is avoiding what he promised to do. That's basically what Americans think.
It's interesting.
So they get it. They understand it.
Yeah. I'm sort of fascinated in the idea of conducting a text focus group. I imagine it costs less.
Oh, yeah, a lot less.
That's
Plus,
interesting.
plus you
And
get to write it up as something different, and you get to quote the
yeah,
text, so you fill out your story. It's great.
yes, it's about
Can be done by AI. You don't even need reporters.
aha. Now you're on to something. I was going to ask when you said you read the headline. We texted nearly 1,100 Americans. I am sure there's a byline on this thing, but no, actually there isn't. It just says by Washington Post staff. I was going to ask who texted 1,100 people. That sounds
Rock.
intensive, yeah. And everybody left the Washington Post like yesterday. All the columnists are gone. Everybody's leaving. They're taking buyouts and abandoning the Jeff Bezos Post. And that's a whole story in itself. So that I wondered, all right, well, who did the texting? And I can't even, dismiss it as an issue by looking at the byline and saying, well, here's a name. This is the guy who says he did it. No, Washington Post staff. All right, that's it.
So this is Mona Charen, conservative, writing in the Bulwark. The MAGA revolution is eating its own. After years of stoking conspiracy theories, Trump and his allies now find themselves unable to dispel one.
Well, they've been fattening themselves for this for a while.
Yeah.
So it makes
An
sense.
authoritarian movement cannot demand acquiescence from a formerly liberty-preserving populace for any old reason. It has to be an emergency. And that's what the pedophile fantasy has always provided. MAGA doesn't tell its followers to vote for Republicans because Democrats have the wrong prescriptions for the price of groceries or housing costs. The heart of the MAGA message is that Trump's opponents aren't just wrong, but they're part of a vast conspiracy to commit pretty much the worst crime most people can imagine. That's why the MAGA faithful fervently pray for mass arrests in which the guilty will at last be separated from the innocent. A secular rapture. That's basically the same thing they're promising with immigration. We're going to separate the criminals from the normal people, and we're only going to send criminals to horrible prisons abroad. As self-styled anti-censorship activist Mike Vence explained, belief in a widespread pedophile cult helped to birth the MAGA movement. You trained us to go after this issue. We've been grown in a lab. Chemicals have been mixed together to breed this type of person who would care about Jeffrey Epstein. This is a good explainer for liberals to say, I don't even understand why this is such a big deal. It's part and parcel and key and core to who MAGA is.
Yeah.
And there's a separate reason here, which she sort of alludes to, but let's just say it outright. You have to accuse Democrats of being pedophiles because pedophilia is horrible, and you need an excuse to treat Democrats horribly.
Yes.
And so, that's why it's so important that this be nailed down. That's why we went to Pizza Planet basement and Hillary Clinton and all this. It's got to be true because otherwise, how can we justify, driving across the country to shoot people?
Usually it's difficult to justify that.
I mean, now it only happens with the occasional nutcase, but we need a movement that does this. And the way to do that is to tie the Democrats to pedophilia. And if you think I'm exaggerating or being overblown about it, I'm not.
And by the way, I mean, I guess the flip side of that, which is also established by the record number of Republicans who eventually end up actually being arrested and prosecuted for that very same crime or related crimes.
Well, I was just doing the research.
Yeah, well, there's that. That's usually their cover-up. But I wondered whether any of it was driven by, who's the last person you're going to suspect in this instance? And it's the person who says he's crusading against this, obviously.
Right. After the weeks-long search, Justice Department investigators apparently found little more than what was already known, which led to furious finger-pointing. Bondi blamed Patel. Bongino pouted that he was so worried about disappointing his mouth-breathing fans he couldn't report to work. Bondi and Patel had a report to Trump, and so the MAGA revolution is eating its own. But lest we get too excited and imagine imminent revelations will cause his downfall, let's recall he was able to persuade Republicans in 2016 that he could take on the corruption in American politics because he played the game himself, so he knows all about it.
Well, he can take on the pedophilia for the same reason, I guess.
Right. So the most cleansing outcome for the scandal would be for the MAGA faithful to be brought face to face with what lying lowlifes the people in Trump's crowd are. It would be a teachable moment if they were to see with their own eyes that the elaborate tales of pedophilia were all boob bait for Bubba, that it was all lies all the time, that not pinning hopes on finding a smoking gun about Trump's behavior is the very best reason to release as many of the files as possible. We've learned on the left that there's no smoking gun for Trump's behavior. The people on the right think that there's a smoking gun for Obama and Clinton, especially Hillary Clinton's stuff. And that's why they're desperate to have these files released. Well, release all the files. At least the ones that, legally can. Don't release the pedophilia stuff.
Yeah.
Don't release the child abuse stuff. But release what you can. And of course, if you're still holding back legally because you can't, then you must be part of the cover-up.
Yeah.
So this is an unwinnable situation. This is a lose-lose for Trump, and it's just going to go on and on and on and on. And by the way, right now I'm looking at YouGov Donald Trump favorability. It's at a relatively low point in his current administration, 43.9% approve in this particular poll, 54.7% disapprove. But it's pretty clear that he had a moment in November where he reset the clock and got at least to 50-50. And then it's been downhill ever since. And that's typical for administrations. And it's one of the reasons why when we look at the generic ballot for Democrats and find they're winning by 3 or 4 points in July of 2025, the typical historical pattern is the in-power party just does worse and worse and worse as time goes on. So Trump's not doing himself any favors by splitting the Republican base, and eventually that's going to come around.
Okay.
So that's pretty much the show for me for today. I do want to mention one other item which I just thought was of interest, and that is, of course, about politics. We covered New York City and Mandami yesterday. Let's just mention South Carolina.
All right. Is that it? Do you just want to mention them?
Yeah, we're done.
All right.
So Nancy Mace is teasing that she might run for governor.
Who's she teasing with that?
Well, they have
South
a picture
Carolina.
of Gavin Newsom and says, the left is coming for South Carolina. Who can stop them? Nancy Mace.
The left is
And then she says, coming soon, are you ready? That's her ad.
Yeah, sure.
And, Adam Carlson, pollster, who covers New York City, writes, this is really interesting. This would be great if Nancy Mace ran and lost in a primary.
It would be
South
nice
Carolina.
to be rid of her. That's
because
for
it's
sure.
crowded with viable candidates already. There's a good chance Mace not only gives up her safe House seat, but loses the race in humiliating fashion.
Yeah.
And then dies a little inside. That'd be great.
Yeah,
Bless her
I'd be
heart.
for
Yes.
that one. Okay. Sure. Cool. All right. Well, I'm definitely for that happening.
Yeah, I sent you the ad because it's like,
okay.
oh gosh, over the top.
Yeah, there it is. All right, I'll take a look at that one, and I also need to send you. I'll send you these things. We won't pause to play them again on the air since we've already had our Tom Lehrer fix for the day. But I want to send you the take a look in your chat when you're done there. I'll send you the
it's
silent
permanent. The
E
chat's
and-
permanent, so I can do that. I can look at it later.
Okay, very good. And then you can run on along and take care of the rest of the business of the day. And we will catch up with you on Monday when everything has gone to hell.
Yeah, by then.
But it'll be August.
It'll be August, so
Right, it's a different hell.
it's a different month,
Yeah.
different discussion.
Our quota
Same Jeffrey
renews.
Epstein, and we'll talk more about it.
Okay, very good. Thanks, Greg. I
All
appreciate
right,
it.
take
And
care.
everybody appreciates all the Tom Lehrer retrospective as well. Thanks for bringing it to our attention. All right, we can move forward, and I'll send those things. In fact, I'll just chat about them now while I'm getting ready to send them because it's difficult to do two things at once when they involve typing and dictating at the same time. So, okay, let's see. I wanted to send him Silent E, and then the LY one, which I really liked. We only played a part of that one, but I thought that was very clever too. It was certainly very Tom Lehrer. So, leaving his mark on a younger generation that may not otherwise have heard his message the first time around. Okay. 1, 2, all done. All right. So let's see. Other things that I wanted to get to are stuck lodged in Instapaper. We got to go back there for some reminders. And, maybe we can freeform those a little bit based on what I was talking about a little bit earlier and then yesterday on Blue Sky. But the topic came up of all of these. There's a list floating out there somewhere, and I didn't grab it and didn't intend to spend time on on this, but of all the Washington Post columnists and reporters who have left the paper, apparently there was a buyout floated, and a lot of them are taking the buyout and leaving and going elsewhere. They're not leaving journalism, and now these days people are just that much more mobile, and some of them moving to online fora that they can control themselves, sometimes to new publications, sometimes to old publications. If some of them have just moved to from the Washington Post to the New York Times, for instance, which, though it's not covering itself in glory, is not in the same position as the Washington Post is. And well, now, of course, not only undergoing reorganization as well, but I guess it's now bearing the fruit of having been bought out by Jeff Bezos, which for the first couple of years didn't really seem to be posing a huge problem. And I think things have changed. And, well, one of the issues is just his calculus in buying the thing at all in the first place, which was, I think that he probably thought, this is the way I described it yesterday, after laying the groundwork elsewhere. So, but this is as good a place to start as any. I think that Jeff Bezos probably bought the Post. Like, have you ever puzzled through, why would you do that? He's the richest man in America, basically, at the time. And the businesses he's running are, real and substantive, and they're providing value and moving goods in commerce and employing lots of people. It's not vaporware stuff. It's for real. It's predatory, but it's for real, and it's out there. Amazon, right? And even more to the point, Amazon Web Services running the backbone of the rest of e-commerce for everybody else. Even if you're buying anything on the internet, even if you're not buying from Amazon, you're basically buying from Amazon. So that's a pretty good setup, right? Plus, of course, he was offering all of that back-end logistics and computing power as well to the federal government. And, things were working beautifully. So why bother getting involved in the Washington Post at all? You could say that it's not too far afield from what he was already doing with his other businesses, and maybe only because Amazon was now so all-encompassing that adding a newspaper, well, of course, there's some sort of relationship between the news media and what we're already doing, because we're already doing everything. In addition to, does anybody remember, by the way, Amazon starting out early on? Was Amazon always Washington area centric, or am I imagining things, and are they centered somewhere else? But just advertising a lot in Washington. But they used to, years ago, run ads on the radio that they were, remember that originally they sold books. It was the world's largest bookstore, and the premise of their radio campaign was that they were looking for places to store all their books, essentially, and they were building the world's largest bookstore, but it was really online, and yada, and then they expanded into other goods and services, and then from there it explodes. But now they're also involved not only in the back end Amazon Web Services stuff, but also video streaming, right? They caught that bug and saw money being made by Netflix, and now Amazon Prime Video is out there. So arguably direct to consumer entertainment and content delivery. And of course, once the NBA has got a hold of everything, what's the difference between news and entertainment? Nothing. They're both content. So, spam the world with whatever. And now we'll do it with a newspaper too. There was that argument, but I thought the more persuasive argument was probably that Jeff Bezos was now a major player in everything under the sun, plus lots and lots of government contracting. It would pay to gain control of the Washington Post, to use it to promote his interests, not to advertise Amazon for free in the pages of the Washington Post per se, but to drive coverage and the tenor of that coverage to the extent possible. He tried to make it look like he was hands off, but to see if they could drive coverage such that, for instance, his very lucrative government contracting always continues. That the idea that the government ought to be buying its computing services from a private provider was a good idea, or that energy policy should be such that giant data centers are consistently supplied with reliable power and at a lower price than everybody else because it's doing so much for commerce, etc. All of these things would make sense to hold on to the Washington Post for something like that. What he didn't anticipate, and by the way, I had forgotten how long ago he bought the Washington Post, and we looked it up yesterday, just here at the house, and the answer came back 2013, which was a lot earlier than I remember being the case. And then I was like, hold on, double check that, because that looks like an AI answer. Is that the real answer? But it turned out to, I guess, appear somewhere else as well, even if it wasn't really the real answer. But so I think he bought the Post with the idea in mind that he could do this, and not anticipating a Trump presidency. In 2013, I don't think anybody really anticipated a Trump presidency. And although he made it through the first Trump presidency without having this problem, really, such that he had to do what he's doing now. But what has ended up happening is it's come back to haunt him. Now he owns the Washington Post, and having Trump be president means Trump is going to attack the Washington Post, which means Trump is going to be attacking Jeff Bezos, which means he's going to be looking for places to hurt Jeff Bezos' core business in order, allegedly, to punish him for whatever happens in the Washington Post. But also, while I'm at it, maybe I can grab a certain amount of Jeff Bezos' enormous stash of money and move it to me. I will stop attacking your companies. And now, of course, with Trump in charge, ostensibly in charge of the federal government, he can do things like, I'm going to limit the ability of Amazon to compete for these things. I'm going to rescind their contracts. I'm going to stick it to them unless the Washington Post starts to change and become more pro-Trump. And what ends up happening is Bezos is now stuck with the Post as a headache. And, he's limited in his ability to use it for the ends for which he originally probably bought it, and instead has to tend to this headache of owning the thing that Donald Trump hates. And he's had to restructure the Post and, essentially buy out all the columnists and everything in order to restructure it so that it will stop putting a target on the back of his other businesses. And that's problematic for him, but it doesn't have to be because of how wealthy he really is. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. So what was I talking about, and what did I mean? I mean, I do remember what I was talking about. What was I trying to get to? With Bezos buying the Washington Post back in 2013 and why he did it. And he's not told me why he did it, and maybe he's told someone else, and maybe he lied, or maybe he told the truth, or whatever he thought the best spin was. But it's now been 12 years since buying the Post, and I should probably look around and see if I can fish out the list of Post employees who have said they're taking the buyout. But I think he thought, like I said, that he could use it to his benefit, sometimes straightforwardly, I don't know, getting people to write great stories about how awesome Amazon Web Services is, but it's just generally impacting the public perception of the idea that private web services companies should be, that it's okay and in fact positive for them to be building enormous enclosed spaces that are super cooled with enormously expensive energy. And by the way, I noticed that I haven't seen much in the way of solar panels on the roofs of these things, by the way, but we're surrounded by them. This area is full of data centers. And, it's a public policy issue. They eat up so much power that you really have to, have a hand on all these levers that means subsidizing power for you by raising the rates on everybody else, by constructing new capacity, and if you're going to build new generating plants, that's a public policy issue as well, and transmission lines and wires and the routes that they take. There's all sorts of reasons why Jeff Bezos is going to want to be in control of the narrative. But then, like we said, he finds himself the target of Donald Trump's ire because it's a news operation, and when it's not laying the groundwork for the promotion of the Amazon vision of the world, it's reporting things that happen in the world. And Donald Trump is doing bad things in the world, and they're reporting it, and he's angry about it. And he says, stop doing that, or else I'll something. And there isn't a great deal that, certainly not legally, that the president can do with respect to fighting the Washington Post necessarily, although he can, put out the word to his MAGA wackadoodles that they should maybe beat up all the Post writers, and they seem to be interested in doing that at those rallies. But he can also put the screws to Bezos in all of his government contracting, and not even in the government contracting. Let's say, hey, Glenn Youngkin, you're a MAGA wannabe. Why don't you put the pressure on Amazon by using your power as governor of Virginia to pressure local authorities to reject their zoning requests for new data centers, or rerouting power lines such that they would be preferred customers versus everybody else. Maybe we, put the kibosh on that and, find ways of dinging Amazon that would really hurt him. So, as I said, he ends up finding out it's actually a bigger headache and a different kind of headache than he thought he was buying with the Washington Post. And so he's looking for a way out of it by restructuring the Post such that it won't draw so much Trumpian ire. But then you got to start thinking about exactly how wealthy he really is. That I guess he's not the wealthiest person in the United States anymore on paper, and I guess Elon Musk surpassed him at some point. But we're still talking about probably in the neighborhood of about $250 billion in net worth for Bezos. Let's see. I mean, it changes from day to day when you have that much money. And you might be getting garbage answers too if you just do searches and rely on, AI or whatever pops up at the top now. I assume to be AI if you're dealing with Google. But yeah, so about $241.2 billion, almost 250, and it's a rounding error at that point. So why is that important besides the fact that we should be taxing the rich much more extensively? One of the reasons is that I bring it up is this headache that he's created for himself by owning the Washington Post, and it seems to be spending, a lot of money for you and me and nothing for him. So I guess he doesn't have to worry about it too much to fix this problem, or to re-engineer the Post so that it's not as much of a problem for his other things. But if it's a liability for his core businesses, then get rid of it. Right? You don't bother fixing it. I guess he still thinks he can salvage the PR mission of the Post, and maybe, but I don't know. I wonder how much of his time is occupied by trying to fix things such that Trump ends up taking his eye off the Washington Post and the guy who owns it. Why not just not be the guy who owns it? Now, for somebody who's sitting on $240+ billion, you might ask, well, how much did Bezos pay to buy the Post? And it's a long time ago now. 2013 dollars are not the same thing as 2025 dollars, and not the same after the COVID impacts as well, and supply chain problems that we've had, and inflationary problems. So it's not necessarily apples to apples, but the purchase price of the Washington Post, not a copy of the Washington Post, not the Washington Post building, not licensing the name, the whole thing, the whole enchilada, $250 million. That is about 1/1000th of his net worth, which, if you want to do it proportionally, if you have a net worth of $1 million And I don't know how many of you have a net worth of $1 million. I don't think. I don't know. I have a net, hard to tell these days because the inflated price of my little house that we bought, townhome that we bought in 1995, and in this area with inflated prices, it's kind of exploded. So again, I guess if you think net worth, well, it includes your home, even though we're not done paying for this home, you get the idea. Anyway, I suppose you could put together, I don't know how you calculate these things, but it would be inaccurate, I would say, to say I am a millionaire, right? Wouldn't it be? Even if your house is worth a lot, but you're otherwise like, well, I can't afford to move into another house in my neighborhood, right? If I were to sell this townhome and move to down the street, hey, that's not working. I can't afford that. So, all right, but let's take somebody who's earning, couple $100,000 a year with a fabulous job as an executive somewhere and who has summer homes and has managed to put together an investment portfolio and is worth $1 million. The point really here is to illustrate, okay, I admit I'm not worth $1 million and neither are you, right? But if you had a little more or a lot more, depending on where you stand vis-a-vis being a millionaire, and I ask you, Mr. Millionaire, Thurston Howell, how quaint that now seems, would you be interested in buying the Washington Post for $1,000? That's 1/1000th of your net worth if you're a millionaire, right? And you say, sure, bargain price for the Washington Post. That's essentially what it was, though, to Bezos, $250 million. Which, by the way, also I think is a remarkably low price just in general. It was such a prestige property, but, it's not outside of the realm of possibility for a business person to put together such a deal and pool resources, borrow money, get venture capital together, whatever, buy the thing. But he gets to buy it for cash because it's pocket change for him, and that changes the dynamic. That's the thing. Well, we'll get back to the 1/1000th thing, but it changes the dynamic. And that was my first point about Jeff Bezos owning the Washington Post is people were saying, I can't believe he's just destroying this prestige property and ruining one of the newspapers of record for the United States that everybody turns to. Why would you destroy an asset like that? And I don't know why you would, but I know that you're not going to be afraid to if you have $240 billion already, and you spent $250 million to buy it. Now, normally, the rest of us, I guess, we're still laboring under the illusion that if you pay $250 million for something, you're going to want to make sure you get your money's worth, or that it becomes profitable, that it's a real going concern, and stays that way. But if you have $250 billion, maybe you just don't care. Ironically, the hyper-capitalist system now means that there's no economic pressure on Jeff Bezos to make sure that this venture works. But by the same token, it doesn't matter if he owns it or not anymore. Oh, and one other thing, just another idea to put the importance of the Washington Post in proportion for you. In the way that Jeff Bezos is entitled to look at it, even if he doesn't opt to look at it this way. Jeff Bezos spent twice as much money on his boat that he did on the Washington Post. So that ought to make you feel good if you're a Washington Post columnist talking about taking a buyout and retiring. He's buying you with nothing, right? He spent twice as much on his boat as he did on the Washington Post. So that's where you rank in importance, I guess, and the kind of financial commitment he was making to making the Washington Post a success. He owns a $500 million mega yacht. And then I just for fun was circulating a picture of the Abeona, Abeona, this 75 meters long, it's 250 foot long ship with a helipad on it, and showing it to everybody, except that's not Bezos's yacht. That's the support vessel for Bezos's yacht, a 250-foot boat with a helipad on top. That's what has to sail around behind his actual mega yacht, which I forget the name of. Is it Koru or something like that? Though it's a sailing vessel, but the longest sailing vessel and the biggest sailing yacht in the world, and he spent $500 million on it. And that's insane, except, again, who cares? I've got 240 of these things. I'm going to spend half of one of those 240 on this boat, and another $75 million on the support vessel. The support vessel costs about $5 million a year in operating costs alone. And so when he wants to take a helicopter out to his yacht, he doesn't have a helipad on his yacht. He has a helipad on the boat that sails behind his yacht so he can land his helicopter. You get the idea? That's the kind of money we're talking about. And only half of that is what he spent on the Washington freaking Post. So does he care whether it does a good job reporting news? No. Does he care whether it does a good job being profitable? No. He doesn't. Everybody else in the world, having bought the Washington Post, would feel compelled to make sure that they kept doing what worked and didn't do avoided things that didn't work, that hurt the paper, that made it less profitable. But Jeff Bezos doesn't have to worry about that because capitalism, which is a little bit weird because it was supposed to be inherent in the system that he would want to do what works and keep doing what works. But so now he's got this headache that causes him trouble with Donald Trump. And because of the nature of his wealth, Jeff Bezos, if this headache gets to be too big for him, can just close the Washington Post. I don't know whether, that's in his interest or not, but he could do this too. He could give away the Washington Post. I mean, I'll take it if you're giving it away. He could sell it for $1 or raffle it off. Or sell it at a fire sale price if he really wants to. I mean, I guess that would be the smart thing to do. And take some of that money back. But it doesn't matter whether he does or doesn't in the grand scheme of things for Jeff Bezos. So I guess don't look for it to get better, but also tax the rich. I guess is basically what I'm saying. It's really rather amazing that this is the situation we find ourselves in. And I thought it was important that people, I guess, keep that in mind as we watch the Post deteriorate. Though, they're still doing reporting that we need to be able to turn to in order to fill you in on what's happening elsewhere in the world. Like, for instance, let's see, is there a Washington Post article up at the top of this? Is probably not, as a matter of fact. Although, just to follow up and give you a Washington Post article, the one that's nearest the top, if not nearest the top of importance necessarily. It's an important one. That's an Instapaper. The GOP House Committee chair, that is to say James Comer, chair of the Oversight Committee, it says here, has yet to issue a subpoena for the Epstein files. It sounds like James Comer is getting himself in trouble too, and maybe has a little bit of a paperwork issue, just like Donald Trump does. The chairman, it notes, you remember probably that there was a somewhat splashy headline just the other day last week, before the House finally gave up and left for August recess, that they had been unsuccessful in tamping down the MAGA revolt. And as in a combination with the Democrats said, yeah, we're going to subpoena these Epstein files. If you're not releasing them, we're going to subpoena them and we'll release them. And they went ahead and did it, and everybody said, "Oh my God, they broke with Trump." Well, procedure gets in the way again. Although I think they'll clear out of the way eventually, maybe. But the chairman, it turns out, the subheader reads here, is physically required. Physically, they're going to move the papers. Physically required to sign each subpoena, but there is no deadline under the rules by which Representative James Comer must issue those subpoenas. Isn't that an interesting twist on things? Katia Goba has put together this report a week. And when was it? It was now it's listed as having been updated yesterday. So I'm not certain when the original was. But a week after a House Oversight Subcommittee voted to subpoena the Justice Department for records related to Jeffrey Epstein, the chairman of the full committee still hasn't issued the order. The delay stands in stark contrast to the subpoena Representative James Comer, Republican of Kentucky, the House Oversight Chairman, issued and signed within 24 hours of a similar subcommittee vote that compelled Epstein associate Ghislaine Maxwell to testify before Congress. And it raises questions about Republicans' willingness to hold the Trump administration accountable for its failure to release the Epstein files in the face of significant backlash from the president's GOP base. Comer is no longer in Washington after the House recessed for 5 weeks following that subcommittee vote. Under House rules, the full panel must then issue the subpoena. The chairman is physically required to sign each subpoena, but there's no deadline by which Comer must issue those subpoenas, according to House rules. They figured they didn't need that because obviously the chairman's not going to hold back. Clearly, if they get to the stage where they're issuing subpoenas, he's on board. Otherwise, presumably, he would have convinced the rest of the committee not to do this thing. Oh well. Chairman Comer has been clear that subpoenas will be issued in the near future. A spokeswoman for House Oversight Committee, Jessica Collins, said in a statement on Tuesday. She added that the House is preparing 11 subpoenas to cover prominent former officials who lawmakers appear to believe have knowledge of the Epstein case, which has spanned 2 decades. At the same time, it voted to subpoena the Epstein files. The oversight panel voted to demand all communications about Epstein between who? Then President Joe Biden and his administration, as well as to subpoena a longer list of prominent figures from Democratic and Republican administrations, including Bill and Hillary Clinton. Hillary Clinton, of course, did not have an administration. Former FBI Director James Comey, former Attorneys General Merrick Garland, Bill Barr, Jeff Sessions, Loretta Lynch, Eric Holder, and Alberto Gonzales, as well as former Special Counsel Robert Mueller. So everybody gets a subpoena. If he issues any of them, that is. Meanwhile, Senate Minority Leader Charles E. Schumer of New York and several Democratic senators have invoked a rarely used law, remember this, to try to force the Justice Department to release all of its investigative files related to Epstein by August 15th. That's now just 2 weeks away. In a letter to Attorney General Pam Bondi, sent Tuesday, first reported by the New York Times, because the Washington Post is losing all of its columnists, I guess. The Democratic senators cited the Rule of 5. You heard about that earlier, which requires, I'll put it in scare quotes, requires government agencies to provide information if requested by any 5 members of the Senate Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs Committee. The letter was signed by Schumer and all 7 Democratic senators on that committee. The Justice Department did not immediately respond to a request for comment on Wednesday about whether or when it would comply with the Senate move. Like, but you're compelled to. No, we're really not. Well, what do you mean compelled? Like, who's going to make me? Well, we'll have standing. See you in about 4 years. Sure. Good luck with your standing. Last Wednesday, 3 Republicans, Representatives Brian Jack of Georgia, Nancy Mace, again, South Carolina, and Scott Perry of Pennsylvania. Remember when we talked about this? It's a weird grouping. Anyway, these 3 joined Democrats in an 8-2 decision to compel the Justice Department to release the files during a hearing of the House Oversight Federal Law Enforcement Subcommittee. It marked the first time Congress has officially voted to subpoena the department to respond to Epstein-related demands. The subcommittee voted to compel the Justice Department to release the full, complete, unredacted files on Epstein, omitting the names and anything personally identifiable about his victims, which is to say, you please release the full, complete, unredacted files once you're finished redacting them. Whatever. In a separate subcommittee hearing, members voted unanimously to subpoena Maxwell. Comer issued the subpoena within 24 hours for a deposition slated to take place on August 11th. Maxwell's lawyer has since responded by suggesting she would be open to testifying if she's granted immunity. Shouldn't be granting her anything. Something Comer immediately rejected. That's good. Maxwell also requested the committee provide its questions beforehand and reschedule until after her appeal is resolved before the U.S. Supreme Court. She's hoping the Supreme Court will spring her and she won't have to make any deal or talk to anybody. Democrats who voted for the subpoena haven't publicly criticized Comer for failing to issue it at this point for some reason, but Representative Robert Garcia of California, the top dem on the Oversight Committee, tried to preempt delays through a letter to Comer asking him to, quote, immediately transmit that subpoena. The letter also said that Comer should require the Justice Department to produce the files within 30 calendar days, and that Comer must ensure the department complies. Garcia said he devised the strategy to introduce language to release the files before that specific subcommittee, based on which Republicans sit on the panel. Wait, I think I've lost the track of this sentence here. Garcia said he devised the strategy to introduce language to release the files before that specific subcommittee, based on which Republicans sit on the panel and cast and their past comments about Epstein. I see. All right. I guess basically he said they're talking a big game about wanting to be transparent on Epstein, so I'm going to offer a resolution and make them put their money where their mouth is. Got it? We knew this subcommittee that Republicans had set up, that they had set this up to talk about children that were being trafficked, Garcia said. He also said he worked under the radar, limiting correspondence about the plan to subcommittee members and leadership. Issuing the subpoena for the Epstein files would put the GOP House on a collision course with the president, who has told his supporters to move on, and the Justice Department. Bondi stirred a furor when she announced in an early July memo that the case against Epstein was essentially closed, confirming that Epstein died by suicide and that there was no client list containing the names of powerful people who may have abused girls. Justice Department declined to comment. Trump and Republicans have been working to tamp down that furor created by the Justice Department's actions after the president and his allies, while campaigning to return to Washington, accused the Biden administration of a massive cover-up for refusing to release the files. But theirs is different, I'm sure. A recent Washington Post poll showed that most Americans strongly support releasing all the files in the Epstein case and suspected the documents containing embarrassing information about Trump, that they do contain such information, but also other Democrats and billionaires. The issue exploded right before House Republicans broke for August recess, with Republicans on the Rules Committee repeatedly being put in the uncomfortable position of having to vote on whether to release the files when Democrats introduced language to do so. The issue prompted House Speaker Mike Johnson to send lawmakers home one day early, but not before Representative Summer Lee of Pennsylvania brought the motion in the Federal Law Enforcement Subcommittee. Johnson has repeatedly said House Republicans are committed to transparency, but has buffered his comments with calls to protect victims who may have been associated with Epstein and whose names could be included in any release. Yes, he said, when asked Sunday on Meet the Press whether the Epstein files should be made public, I agree with President Trump, with the Department of Justice, with the FBI, that you need all credible evidence and information out there. That word credible is important. And why? Because you have to protect innocent people's names and reputations whose names might be, as you noted at the outset of the program, might be intertwined in all these files. So lots of hedging, et cetera, et cetera. Good backgrounder, just by way of reminding you. But the true takeaway there is the House Republicans are running around saying, well, we're on board with this. We've voted to subpoena the Justice Department, make them release the files. Okay, how come the chairman of the committee won't sign the damn things and get the process started that you voted on? I don't know. Well, makes for an interesting set of questions anyway. So that's what they're up to over at the Washington Post. I mentioned to you that Laura Loomer is doing weird things, and that is true. I have a New York Times report about that, which I think takes a slightly different tack than another piece I put away from Cyber Scoop, which I don't usually go to, but sounds like they have a pretty good handle on things. And it was the first place that I saw the story written up. It might be a shorter synopsis of things, though I suspect it would be wise to look at the New York Times reportage on it to get the various details. But in order, I guess, I'll include at least a link to the New York Times thing, and I'll have to scan that off the air and see whether there's anything that's digestible that's different from what Cyberscoop says. Greg Otto is the name of the writer for Cyberscoop, reporting that the Army Secretary is forcing West Point to rescind an appointment given to one, Jen Easterly? And let's find out why. And it turns out the answer is Laura Loomer. The U.S. Military Academy, the subheader reads, announced Tuesday that the former CISA, right? Remember, so what are they again? I can't even remember what the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, where Chris Krebs was, the people who said, yeah, the election was not manipulated by hackers. It was actually quite secure, and Trump got mad and fired them. Well, she worked there. The former CISA head was supposed to join the Department of Social Sciences at West Point, and Army Secretary Dan Driscoll pulled the offer on Wednesday. And it turns out Laura Loomer's behind it, even though she's wrong about it. The United States Military Academy abruptly ended the appointment of Jen Easterly to a high-profile academic position in West Point's Department of Social Sciences, according to a memorandum issued Wednesday by the Secretary of the Army. On Tuesday, the Academy announced that Easterly was named as the next Robert F. McDermott Distinguished Chair. I love those distinguished chairs, like Ian Reifowitz. They're very distinguished, the two of them. And what is that? That's a department position created way back in 1943, it turns out, to bring a leading scholar, practitioner, or expert in the fields of social sciences, such as economics, political science, international relations, to West Point, because, you want an educated officer corps. But they appointed her and then undid it, and we'll get back to the details of who said so and why after this. Hi everybody, it's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. We're going to have to move a little more quickly on this, and I think it's probably worth looking at both of these articles. Could eat up an awful lot of time, but I think it's important background. We left off in the middle of, or the beginning of, the Cyber Scoop story by Greg Otto explaining, one, who is Jen Easterly and what happened. Why did she get fired from, or why did she have the offer to join temporarily the faculty at West Point, the United States Military Academy, rescinded by the Secretary of the Army? And the answer is yet to come. In a since-deleted LinkedIn post, the Academy welcomed the former Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency Director and Academy alumnus, she went to West Point, after, quote, an extraordinary career of service in the public and private sectors. Why would you rescind such a thing? But this is, of course, their promotion of her, of the offer made to her first, where they were posting on LinkedIn. Director Easterly's unique perspective, combining military experience, advanced academic training, private sector innovation, and senior government service, makes her ideally suited to guide discussions on the critical issues facing our nation and the world. So how do you go in one day from ideally suited to OMG, no effing way? Get out of here, we never hired you. And given that you now know that the answer ultimately is Laura Loomer, you're probably a little worried about what the impact of this might really be. After the announcement, far-right activist Laura Loomer suggested on X, and I think probably under the influence of the street drug ecstasy, not that she posted it on Twitter, but that's what they mean. She suggested that Easterly should not be named to the position, though she had been, due to her work under the Biden administration. Oh, God, you can't have that, obviously. But specifically, her work under the Biden administration, allegedly in cooperation with Nina Jankowicz, who served as the executive director of the Disinformation Governance Board of the United States. By the way, for her part, Jankowicz later on Wednesday posted on Blue Sky, not Twitter, that, no, Never worked with Easterly. So you're just incorrect on that one. And even if you had been correct, so effing what? But you're not. On Wednesday, nonetheless, Secretary of the Army Dan Driscoll announced, also in a post on X, that the position would be rescinded and a full review of the Academy's hiring practices would be conducted. So that's also interesting, too. So for all of you who are probably following another big story that we haven't focused on, that closely, but when we're talking about the pressure that the Trump administration is bringing on Columbia University, Harvard University, and now expanding outward. I think we mentioned what was going on with George Mason University, which seems insane on its face, but the president of George Mason University is black. And that's, I think, what's happening here. Among other things, it's also an extraordinarily diverse and very large student body based in typically very liberal Northern Virginia, despite the fact that the faculty has, some of the faculty have a more conservative bent than you would think Trump would be busy attacking. But he's now expanded it, by the way, to Brown University, Northwestern University, any number of places, Stanford University. And now actually West Point, the United States Military Academy, now says it has to have a full review of the Academy's hiring practices because everybody knows how woke West Point is. Got to do something about that. What? That's where we are. So let's see the rest of the story here. The Secretary of the Army took immediate action to direct West Point to terminate the service agreement with Jen Easterly, pause outside groups from selecting Academy employees or instructors, and has requested a review of West Point's hiring practices, an Army spokesperson told Cyberscoop. Ahead of the upcoming academic year, we are crafting a deliberate approach to ensure that our future officers are best prepared to meet the demands of the modern battlefield. There's your boilerplate stuff, but of course what they mean is, wink, wink, we're going to get no more of the woke. Get rid of the DEI, which you would have thought they already did, and they never really had a great amount of it, but well, the ongoing fight with the heroes of the men and women of our uniformed services who get discounts on mattresses and we also really don't care about because Donald Trump doesn't actually care about anybody. They're suckers and losers at heart, but, whatever. He likes military parades. When asked for a comment, the Academy pointed Cyberscoop to the Office of the Secretary of the Army, which is, I guess, where it should start. Typically a temporary or rotating position. The McDermott Distinguished Chair, and that's what she was being, that's the offer she had rescinded. It's often held by a civilian academic or prominent government or industry leader for a set term. In other words, it's not going to do a great deal of harm to let her do this, with a goal to expose cadets to accomplished leaders for academic and professional development. Like, what you want from them. Prior to Easterly's appointment, Douglas Lute, a former U.S. ambassador to NATO, served in the position. The revocation is the second incident since the Trump administration assumed power in which current officials reprimanded former CISA, whatever we say about that, directors for their work. You may remember it because of this. In April, President Donald Trump revoked the security clearance of former CISA leader Chris Krebs, with the White House saying he was, get this one, here's one for every Republican accusation as a confession, that Krebs was a, quote, significant bad faith actor who weaponized and abused his government authority, unquote, during his time leading the agency. Well, by the way, attempts to reach Easterly for comment, unsuccessful. We'll see whether the New York Times had any more success with that in reading their version of things. But not only a great example of every Republican accusation being a confession, this, quote, significant bad faith actor who weaponized and abused his government authority, but just to link it back, once again, this is what we do on the show, because this is the way my brain works, but linking it back to the other every Republican accusation is a confession moment we had earlier in the show, the accusations, leveling accusations at Democrats being involved in some sort of weird child sex trafficking ring. And all of them are pedophiles, vampire pedophiles at that. And it's okay to attack them and maybe, let's say dress up as a cop and gun them down in their homes or elsewhere. Because after all, they're very bad people. And it was said by a fake account maybe an AI account of some kind, early AI chatbot was Q dropping these hints about why you should be murdering Democrats and which ones to do. Apparently, that was their thing. But once again, just to bring it back to the comment that I made about it, which was, well, there's also the factor of helpful as cover-up. Who's the last person you ordinarily would suspect of being guilty of all these things? Clearly, it can't be the person who's constantly publicly crusading against it, because that would be crazy. But that seems to be the best cover that they can offer themselves. And what do you do if you are a bad faith actor, a significant bad faith actor who wants to weaponize and abuse his government authority? Accuse other people of being bad faith actors who weaponize and abuse their government authority, because they're definitely not going to do that yourself. And it works in many ways, including the backhanded immunization version of if somebody says, me, I'm not the significant bad faith actor who weaponized and abuses government authority. You are the significant bad faith actor who weaponized and abuses government authority, and everybody knows it. You can at least say to your base, please, with these guys, it's total projection all the time. Anytime come on, at least make up your own accusation. You're just saying I'm rubber and you're glue when I catch you dead to rights being a significant bad faith actor who weaponizes and abuses government authority. You can't just accuse me of the same thing. That's not the way the playground rules work. And among the headline writers of America, it's not. So you're stuck, which should bring me around to another topic. But first, the New York Times treatment of this, because the campaign, the latest Laura Loomer campaign, extends beyond Jen Easterly. Loyalty enforcer, in scare quotes, loyalty enforcer Laura Loomer targets additional officials is the headline. Subheader, the far-right activist is continuing to use her close association with President Trump to go after those she deems insufficiently loyal. And I want you to keep a different framework in mind in all this. What she's doing is horrible for a number of reasons, but I want you to keep one of my favorite blue sky frameworks for thinking about this in mind. This is elder abuse, and I've put that out on Blue Sky, and most people get it. Some people then write back and they say, I don't care if Donald Trump is being abused. He's a jerk and I hate him. Well, maybe yes, maybe no, but this is not supposed to. And then others say, why are you defending him? He knows what he's doing. I don't think he really actually knows in the traditional sense what he's doing. No. But I think of it as elder abuse in this way. Think of it as, instead of capturing a confused elderly person under your influence so that you can get the key to the mailbox and steal their Social Security checks, you are capturing this person so that they give you the keys to, I don't know, launch nuclear missiles, run the government, make hiring and firing decisions in important places based on nothing, or based on things that you made up even, so that you can wield government power that's supposed to come with the accountability of having faced an election without the trouble or expense or ability to win an election and be formally entrusted with that stuff, even when it's a mistake to formally entrust it to the idiots we actually do elect. Laura Loomer is nobody. She has no power. She should be gone. She has no power here, but she isn't doing that because she's found a way to manipulate an elderly and confused Donald Trump. Other people have too. Stephen Miller is doing it. Originally, I was speaking of it in terms of keeping the campaigns going so that money kept flowing to the Trump family, and it was elder abuse. This is a different kind of elder abuse. It's the same idea here, but to extract money that his kids keep pushing him out on the stage because he's a money-making machine, and they get the money. And he's almost dead, and pretty soon when he is dead, they'll have that money outright, presumably, unless he screwed them over in his will. I don't know. But, that's one goal of the elder abuse, but the others are just seeking to extract probably some money as well, but power. They're not stealing the Social Security checks. They're stealing your right to honest and transparent governance. That's a big deal, and it's a very valuable prize. Now, thinking about that, Laura Loomer and her activities as reported by Robert Draper, Julian E. Barnes, and Christina Jewett. I've decided that if people take the time to put their middle initial in there, I might as well read it out loud. Laura Loomer The far-right activist and wackadoodle and self-described Trump administration loyalty enforcer, self-described, has had another busy stretch. Last Friday, April Falcon Doss, the general counsel of the National Security Agency, that sounds important, was fired after Ms. Loomer spotlighted conservative attacks of her previous work, including for the Senate Intelligence Committee's Democratic staff. Democratic staff! You heard me. Then, the Food and Drug Administration's top vaccine official, Dr. Vinay Prasad, resigned on Tuesday after a post by Ms. Loomer on social media in which she pointed out his past statements disparaging President Trump and describing his following as a cult, though it is one. But in the meantime, this is all hypocrisy as she's attacking him over Epstein. How loyal is she? Yeah, well, we may have solved the paradox there by pointing out that this is her understanding that Trump wants to get her back in the fold after her criticism of him on the Epstein situation, and this might be a way to do it, and it probably is. On Wednesday, the Army Secretary, Daniel Driscoll, ordered the U.S. Military Academy at West Point to rescind the employment offer it made to cybersecurity expert and Army veteran Jen Easterly. Ms. Easterly, who has worked for both Republican and Democratic administrations, had drawn Ms. Loomer's ire for serving as the director of the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency under President Joseph R. Biden Jr. I probably don't need to do his middle initial, but they are the most recent examples of government officials being, quote, Loomered, in Ms. Loomer's own parlance. She's a self-promoter, obviously. A podcaster, an influencer who expresses fierce fidelity to Mr. Trump, Ms. Loomer has flexed the power of her broad social media following and her access to the White House to target those whom she views as insufficiently loyal. Not including herself, of course, because she gets a pass. While it is difficult to know the extent of her reach, multiple officials across the administration have been pushed out after ending up in Ms. Loomer's sights. This year, she called for a purge of the National Security Council. That's not dangerous. Targeted top officials at the National Security Agency, and even went after a career federal prosecutor in Los Angeles. Kevin Carroll, a former CIA officer who's now a lawyer representing intelligence officials fired by the Trump administration, said Ms. Loomer's unfettered influence was dangerous. And we knew this as far back as the 2024 campaign, where she somehow managed to weasel her way back into his good graces and onto the plane. She tried this in the 2016 campaign and the 2020 campaign. I don't know about so much the 2016 campaign. She might have been focused on handcuffing herself to the Twitter doors office at that point. But she's repeatedly tried to get in on the campaign, and they never let her. People block her. And then she finds a way to Trump, and Trump says, don't block her, bring her on the plane. And remember, and she was with him, the last person to speak to him before he went out and debated with Kamala Harris and pulled the they're eating the cats and dogs story out. Laura Loomer. And then Susie Wiles supposedly taking things over and organizing things. And now she's supposed to be, chief of staff in the White House, and just can't keep Loomer from being chief of staff of the White House without even having to show up for work. Anyway, Kevin Carroll, the CIA officer now representing the fired intelligence officials, says, you have a person from outside of the government of no national security experience and with extreme views having de facto hire and fire authority over some of the most senior and important positions in the United States government. Eventually, when all of the qualified people are driven out and only the people acceptable to Laura Loomer remain, there could be an extremely bad result for the United States in some international crisis, he added. Of course, we're already getting extremely bad results in those situations anyway, but this will obviously make it worse. Asked to comment on concerns that Mr. Carroll and others have about Ms. Loomer's effect on personnel decisions, a White House spokesman, this is a new one for us, I think, Kush Desai, did not directly respond, instead saying that Mr. Trump had, quote, assembled the best and brightest talent to put America and Americans first. Okay, sure. A senior administration official said the recent departures were not necessarily tied to Ms. Loomer's public criticisms, but declined to elaborate. Mr. Trump has publicly praised Ms. Loomer as a fantastic woman, a true patriot, and amazing. For her part, Ms. Loomer, who was denied jobs in both Mr. Trump's campaign and in his administration. So these people who are standing as gatekeepers are effective in keeping her from getting a job directly, but they can't stop her from influencing Trump on hiring and firing. But for her part, Ms. Loomer has said that she is determined to prove that she is a better judge of personnel than the president's own staff. That's a lofty goal. I was raised to dress for the job you want, and even if you don't have the job, pretend that you do. I don't think that's a good way of raising people, but Ms. Loomer said in an interview this summer, I want to do vetting, so I'm going to do the job I want. And I don't know, some people are sending her money, I guess, in order to do that. Ooh, that reminds me. Yes, it's that time again. But first, Ms. Loomer now appears to have other officials on her radar. Late last week, she was seen walking through the West Wing, cradling a large stack of documents, oh no, that she had brought into the White House. She has recently directed her criticism at a senior Pentagon official, Tom Rakusan, citing an excerpt from a new book that recounts his work at the CIA countering Russia around the time of the 2016 election. Can't have that. Mr. Rakusan, a CIA veteran, is an expert on Russia. Can't have that either. And looked critically at Moscow's effort to manipulate American politics. Ms. Loomer's focus on him caused consternation among current and former officials who said that he is a fan of Mr. Trump and supportive of his agenda. But she's not as big a fan as she is. The CIA declined to comment. The Pentagon did not respond to a request for comment. Ms. Loomer has claimed credit for the removal of at least 3 senior officials from the NSA. General Timothy Haugh, H-A-U-G-H, the former director. Wendy Noble, his deputy, and now Miss Doss, the agency's top lawyer. U.S. officials said Miss Doss's removal and the voluntary retirement of 2 other top lawyers at the NSA has created a noticeable gap in expertise at the agency, whose lawyers must routinely review and approve spying operations. This week, in his first interview since being fired, General Haugh was reluctant to address the circumstances of his dismissal, saying only that he had served at the pleasure of Mr. Trump. And he has to say that now because if he says anything, you'd think he has nothing to lose. He does. Trump will order that his something like reducing his rank after the fact so that he gets less retirement benefits or something like that, or kicking him out of the Army outright. We're going to erase him from the Army. Can I? I don't know. Who cares? I'm going to do it anyway. But General Haugh says, I don't and did not expect an explanation. And from the second I was told I was no longer serving the role, the focus shifts to the leaders the president has put in that capacity. General Haugh said, good soldier. Can't blame him. The impact of losing such expertise appears to trouble Ms. Loomer less than the prospect of having officials in government she thinks cannot be trusted because, she's not a lunatic or anything. In ferreting out those she believes to be disloyal, Ms. Loomer relies on hundreds of tips that she says she receives weekly through her website, as well as encrypted emails from other lunatics. Ms. Loomer said in an interview on Wednesday that she recently received a tip on her website about past remarks by Dr. Prasad, who was the top vaccine and gene therapy official at the FDA, and had the backing of the health secretary, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. And I guess RFK Jr. thinks that he can't fight and defeat Laura Loomer. So that's kind of weird. She said she spoke by phone to the tipster. So there you go. Now it's definitely true. Whom she described as an administration official in one of the health-related government agencies, and then began listening to Dr. Prasad's podcasts, where he had said of Mr. Trump in 2020, I hate him too, and who could blame him? And a year later, joked about using a stuffed toy of the president as a voodoo doll. Why did he? I don't know. Whatever. Dr. Prasad, whose resignation was confirmed on Tuesday by the Health and Human Services Department, declined to comment. I mean, that may all be true. And in the Trump world, I guess that's reason enough to get rid of somebody. At least she didn't make that one up entirely, I guess. Inside the FDA, there were mixed reactions on Wednesday to his abrupt departure and worries about who else could be targeted by Ms. Loomer, according to current and recently departed FDA staff members. Ms. Loomer insists that she's not an absolutist when it comes to auditing the record, as she puts it, auditing the record of current or prospective government officials. This year, she openly supported Jared Isaacman, a billionaire tech entrepreneur, to be Mr. Trump's NASA administrator, despite Mr. Isaacman having made contributions to Democrats. Mr. Trump ultimately withdrew Isaacman's nomination, telling others at the time that he did so because of the entrepreneur's ties to Democrats. Without directly criticizing Trump's decision, Loomer posted on X that, quote, he would have been a fantastic NASA administrator. Isaacman never made derogatory comments about President Trump and has an exceptional talent that's hard to replicate, Loomer said on Wednesday. But when someone like Vinay Prasad insults the president's character and calls into question the sanity of his supporters, then that's somebody who's not going to be a fit for the Trump administration, says the person who's, in fact, not in the Trump administration. It's a curious situation, to say the very least. Okay, there were a couple of other things that came up that I was reminded of, and I'll see if I can't remember what they were and find my way to them. But I mentioned, because we were mentioning Laura Loomer being a podcaster and so influential and just has the freedom somehow to do the job she wishes she was in, vetting employees in the Trump administration. How does she have that free time? Well, she's probably got a lot of financial support from her listeners and followers. And I have to mention, once again, we had a remarkable day, and I should have done this earlier in the show because now we're not going to have time to do it this way. But yesterday I said, I was kidding, but I should probably do this every day. I'm going to annoy you guys about signing up to support the show and showing your support with subscriptions via Patreon until somebody does so during the live broadcast today. And then somebody did, and I was like, how many people are listening anyway? I thought it might be 100. Apparently it's about 200. So still, in all, not too bad. But looked at another way, only 0.5% of those of you listening to the program actually signed up for a Patreon sponsorship during the show. Now, as it happens, that was Pez. Remember when that happened? That was so fun. Then some of you listening, I guess, probably on the podcast side, or who just simply were busy and couldn't subscribe, then also joined in this movement. Ann Wong, who was already a supporter of the show, has, like so many of the rest of you, decided to boost her contribution via Patreon, and we thank you very much, Ann. I love it. I love the idea that you guys would have heard that yesterday. So, you know what? I'm going to do this too. Ryan H., whose name I thought I had seen before, but, I know a couple of Ryans, is a new supporter via Patreon anyway, and we welcome him as well. And Mike D., also a longtime supporter, not just a longtime supporter, but one of the, I guess you would have to say, major benefactors of the show over the years because of the length of time that he's been contributing, has likewise boosted his contribution. Thanks to Mike and Ann and Ryan and all who have been doing this. It's really been a tremendous July. And obviously this has got to be, somewhat annoying, particularly if you're already a contributor and already then boosted your contribution to have to hear this again. But I don't know, maybe it helps vindicate your decision to know that many other people are thinking the same thing too. And I now, the incentive structure is such that if I don't keep doing this and bothering you, then, what happens? I don't know how sustainable it is. But there are still pools of hundreds of you who have room to move and join the rest of us. I feel bad sometimes that when we do this stuff, it tends to be the most popular move seems to be people who are already supporters saying, all right, I'll add a little bit more. But you've been doing your part. You should continue. And I do want everybody to think about how much that they are supporting the show by. And if you're in the $5 range, perhaps, and that was kind of the default for years, maybe you consider a boost as well. I mean, that's not to be excluded. But yeah, I want to get some folks who have yet to sign on, and it's great because then I get to acknowledge that you're here. It's nice to hear from you. It's nice to see that there are real people behind it, and of course, it's nice to be able to think that telling a more truthful version of what's going on out there is worth at least a fraction of lying about it and being able to wield enormous power in the real world as well. That sucks. It's not cool at all to wake up to find out that Laura Loomer has that kind of power, reach, and money. And it kind of sucks. But I appreciate everybody helping to try to close that gap. All right. Well, it's about time for us to jump out for today. We'll have to really jam-pack Friday's show with a lot more news. I want to at least bring two things to your attention. One, I will return to the Judge Boasberg situation probably tomorrow too, because while we read the complaint that was filed against him, it occurred to me last night that this complaint really means that it's now illegal for judges to rule against the president, because they can just make it into like terrorism charges. They just say, well, you're undermining the integrity of something, whether it's the executive branch, the president himself, the federal judiciary somehow. That's what was so bizarre about the charges leveled against Boasberg, was that his comment saying, hey, I'm worried that the executive branch will ignore the rulings of the federal bench. Like, that is a worry. You should be worried about that. There's a whole system of what to do if they do that entitles you to try to enforce your rulings. That's why it's there. So, of course, that's a concern. And it's been an unspoken concern for a long time. But sometimes you have to speak about it and hold people in contempt. That's not a crime. But they're actually saying, oh, no, actually now it is. I mean, it's a really, that might be the most dangerous thing that the DOJ has done to date. It's hard to decide. And I have some other articles about other people who have other ideas about what is the most dangerous thing. We can get to some of those things. Update also that I can share with you tomorrow about Alina Habba. She, of course, pulled the John Sarcone maneuver, sort of, but there was a slight twist to it, something that they didn't do for Sarcone that they did do for her that probably sounded like it was a good idea at the time, but is now creating problems. And it's a Trump and paperwork problem at that, so something exciting to look forward to for tomorrow. We still have yet to react all the way through about the Emil Bove nomination and now confirmation in the United States Senate. And while we're on the subject of confirmations, another total wackadoodle, whose name I believe we've called in the past, now finds himself embedded in the federal government.
NetworksRadio.com.
Though not forever like a federal
You
judge.
have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
All right, time for us to get out of here. Of course, hand things over to Justice Putnam for the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. And while I have his name on my lips, don't forget that NetworksRadio.com needs your support as well. They're the ones who bring you this live broadcast each day. And it costs money to do so. Why not pitch in and help keep them running and listen to Justice and support him next?